tags in there.
And I'll give you some links if you're okay with that.
Oh yeah, I would love all of that.
And then we can put them in that deal.
Absolutely. Good. All right. So it says that it's going to YouTube.
All right.
I'm just going to make sure that we're live here on my phone. I see us.
Okay.
So now I can close it on my computer.
Okay.
I've done it. We've done it, Sue. We're live on YouTube.
Yeah, I was on one time and I had my YouTube open, and because I am who I am, I had so many tabs I couldn't find it. And I could hear myself in the echo. I'm like, dang, what do I do?
I know that was, so I'm the type of person that sort of like, I shoot and aim. That's sort of my style.
Right.
And so I spent 4 minutes researching how to do this with Zoom. And I was like, it'll work. And then I just got on with Robin, we just sort of made it work. So there's a moment.
Spoken like a true unschooler.
It's true. It's really true.
I know. I mean, that's what my daughter says is that, and that's the youngest one. And she says, I run into these people, they're so afraid to make a mistake that they don't do anything. And she says, and I'm totally, let's try it and see what part works. And I know that's an unschooler way.
I think it is. I think it really is. And maybe, we're just launching right into our conversation, but I'll say one tidbit and then I'll introduce us.
Here we are.
But I feel like there's something to be said about not having it just not failing so many times ingrained in your head. Like, oh, that's the wrong answer.
Well,
that's the wrong answer. That's a bad result. Yeah.
And there is only one right answer. Whereas our kids have learned there's so many right answers and there are pieces of right even in the wrong. And so, they're just not afraid of that humiliation. They're not afraid of being wrong. They see it all as just data.
That's interesting information. I really messed that one up. Let me learn how to do it better next time.
Right.
I love that.
Right.
It
doesn't mean it's not, they're not unhappy that their idea didn't work. Of course they're unhappy, but it doesn't immobilize them, So I think
it's not their sense of self. It's an outcome, but it's not who they are.
Right.
That's the difference.
Exactly. That's good.
All right. Well, let's introduce ourselves then. We're live over here on YouTube. And my name's Liana Francisco, if anyone's just stumbled onto this channel. And I've just started doing these series of interviews with homeschooling influencers, is what I'm calling them. People that really do their work in the homeschooling world, that have a lot of great information to be able to give to the community. And I myself grew up as an unschooler. So I was unschooled from when I was born, basically, until I was 16 and I went to college. You could still say I was still an unschooler then, but I was going to college full time. And I did that and ended up doing quite a bit of schooling. So, and that I'll be 39 next month. So that was a long time ago that I was doing this work of being an unschooler. So now I have a little boy who's almost 5 and I'm unschooling him. And so the tables have turned. Right? So I am now the parent trying to be like, oh, unschooling. And man, the world is so different. There's so many resources. There's so much available. And so I both have this wealth of stories and information and inspiration to share with people about how your unschooling kids can really turn out. And then on the other side, I have the parent things of needing to learn from all of you as well. So it's a really fun
it's a
space
scary thing to do sometimes. You know, you didn't know it was scary when you were a kid doing it. But when the responsibility sits in your hands and you're like,
and the scary for me, I think feels really different than the scary for people that aren't second generation homeschoolers and unschoolers. But there's absolutely things about it. For me, it's more like, how do I create the right life for myself still? Right. Because, I was a grown-up for a long time before I became a parent. And so I had quite a bit. My son's only 5. I'm almost 39. Yeah. So I had a lot of time to be a grown-up first. And so it's all right, I'm not for myself comfortable with just being home. How do I do this? How do I be the full parent that I want to be and also be the adult and that full person I want to be. So I'm always figuring this out. So these conversations are also awesome for me in so many different ways.
Well, so every single person has their own baggage, right? Everybody has, that's why there's no formula, why we can't say, yep, here's how you do it. because what about this fear or this combination of fears?
Yeah. And stories and backgrounds and all that stuff. So this, everybody, is Sue Patterson. So Sue Patterson is all over the internet. It's Unschooling Mom2Mom. And I actually found you years ago, I think, when people were first really starting to ask me questions about unschooling. It wasn't that many years ago, maybe 5 years ago or something, 4 years ago. And I saw some of your videos on YouTube. And I was like, oh, this lady's great. Oh, I love that there's someone out there making some great content. And then just sort of forgot about it because it wasn't my area that I was doing much in yet. And then I joined Clubhouse last year and got to meet you on Clubhouse as well. So I've been doing a lot in the Honey, I'm Homeschooling Club on Clubhouse with Robin Robertson. And Sue has been doing her own club on Clubhouse and then also hanging out with us sometimes as well. So Sue, I would love if we want to just start with letting people know a little about who you are if they don't know you, and kind of how you started on this crazy journey of being an unschooling person, and maybe even your definition of what unschooling is. Because that's new for a lot of people too.
Right. Well, so just to start there, there's a difference between unschooling and homeschooling. And that is often the first question somebody says. They come to Unschooling Mom2Mom. We have this big Facebook group. They come and they're like, well, what's the difference? A few things. And homeschooling is when you are doing what school does. You may modify it and try to sugarcoat it, but you're still doing subjects. You're still kind of orchestrating it. You may do it in a different way, but you've got this kind of scope and sequence in your mind, and you're working and you're kind of duplicating that.
Kids should learn these things at these times, and we're making sure they are learning
believing that there's a linear thing that we've got to learn this before we learn that. And so unschooling is living like school doesn't exist. Unschooling is living life. And then when you come to something you don't know, that's when you learn it. So that then
I'm going to write that down. Living like school doesn't exist. I think that's one of my favorite definitions, because I always say to people, I say, we're just living. Right. They're like, what are you doing with your son for his preschool? And I was like, we're just living.
Right. Yeah, I think we're so conditioned to think that it needs to be this top-down, expert-driven, teacher-selected path, because school kind of wants us on that conveyor belt, moving us along. Don't, I remember when we first started and I thought, they just want mediocre. They want to bring the top down and the bottom up to a nice conforming mediocre. And I really don't want that. I want high on the stuff they're good at and low on the stuff they're not good at. And I'm okay with that, because of that concept that if we are living life and we don't know something, we can find out. And so now with the internet, it wasn't like that when we first started in the 90s. But now you really can. You can YouTube it while they're asking the question. And you're like, I don't know, where are those kind of penguins? Or how do I play this game? Or what is something cool going on in the community that we could kind of sparkle up our life a little bit with? And so then that's what unschooling is. Unschooling is just living this full, rich life with your kid and trusting the biology that we're all hardwired to learn. We're all hardwired to have curiosity and want a certain amount of challenge. I mean, not like an overwhelming amount, but nobody wants to just sit and stare at their bedroom wall. They just don't do that. And so, because we want something, and sometimes when you've brought kids out of school, they're so used to being spoon-fed all the information, they don't know what to do.
Yeah, it can even be like uncomfortable for them too, for you to put them in those positions.
So uncomfortable, because think about it. If someone has always told you what to do, and then you have a parent that has found this new thing, they're kind of gung-ho, and they're like, what do you want to learn today? They're like, I don't know.
You're supposed to tell me.
Exactly.
You're supposed to tell me. This is your job.
It's not my job. What have you done? Because they have been conditioned to believe that if somebody's not in charge, this boat is going to crash on the shore. And so depending, like some of the kids that have been in school for a long time, they think mom has lost her mind. And now I do know I did a book a while back called Homeschooled Teens. And since we're at Amazon, it is at Amazon. And there was someone in there who had been unschooled. She was a 39-year-old mom who was unschooling her own kids. And she said it wasn't until she had children that she said to her mom, wow, this unschooling thing is cool. And she's like, yeah, what do you think we were doing? And she's like, I just thought you gave up on us.
That's interesting.
I just thought you were taking me to the vet, letting me play with animals, doing cool life things. And because they had a full, rich life, but the mom didn't say, by the way, this is your education. This is your learning. And so she said, so I didn't want to rock the boat. I liked my life, but I really just thought you gave up.
That's interesting.
That was very interesting.
Because I do feel like in my childhood, I don't remember as using the words unschooling that often.
Probably not.
Yeah. And I think that, I mean, my parents absolutely had read John Holt and they were intentional about it to some degree, but I also remember sometimes my mom would get like stressed out, like, oh my gosh, these kids don't know things. And then she like get a bunch of resources.
No, I did that. What do you mean?
And we sit down.
Do this Key 2 workbook. And they're like, oh, there she goes again.
But it lasts for like a week or less. Exactly. And then we wouldn't do it anymore. So I can kind of get that feeling.
Your mom and I would have been friends.
Yes, I'm sure you guys would be friends. Yeah. And I feel like it's like, there's something where it's like, it just didn't work for our family to do it any other way. So you continue to try to do it different ways, but it just didn't work. So we just would go back to what actually worked for our family.
Well, and I think that when you have that idea about unschooling, that you really do believe they'll learn what they need to learn, and you really want them to continue to grow in the way they're meant to, then you can recognize, wow, that's just fear running the show.
Yeah.
I need to get a hold of it. And that was something that came up recently. I have a coaching group and somebody was talking about, I just want math curriculum. It makes me feel better. And somebody said, it wasn't even me, but what's nice about having a little community of unschoolers, somebody said, maybe you need to learn how to sit with that anxiety. Maybe you need to focus on the anxiety part, and instead of buy curriculum to make your anxiety come down. I thought
that's really the thing to actually solve is why am I so uncomfortable?
Because then why do you keep wanting it? Because it's like you poked a balloon and it kind of let some of the air out and then it filled back up again and you never really dealt with it.
Yeah.
And the other component that I think is really interesting about that is, and maybe this is just maybe it's just a human thing, but why do we want other people to solve our anxiety? Because it's easier, right? You make these changes so I feel better.
Yeah.
Ooh. When we think about it like that, we can think, okay, so maybe I should work on this a little bit.
Yeah, I think that is huge for parents to recognize what is before they act in any, and it could be totally fine. Like you see your kid is excited, they're ready. You see they're ready for a resource, for a learning tool, for an aid. There's nothing wrong with that. Like to get those things for your kid and have them available for them to use, or encourage them to use them even, right? But always asking yourself why.
Right. What's my motivation here?
Yeah. Last year I found myself feeling like I should get some little workbooks and some learning tools for my son around like numbers and alphabet, just all the little like preschool things. And I was starting to look on Amazon for things and looking at what there was around. And I took a moment. I was like, why do I want this? And then I waited until he actually has friends that are in preschool and kindergarten and first grade and stuff. And he was like, I want to have some homework to do. And I was like, oh, okay. And then so I went and got him some little books and stuff. And
one of the things they used to talk about a lot when we were just starting, and it was all email lists and they talked about throwing those little workbooks in with crossword puzzles and Mad Libs and other kind of similar shaped, like similar tools And so if they gravitate towards it, great. But it doesn't say this is the Holy Grail.
You have to learn this. And actually, my son has that because he has coloring books, sticker books, math books, letter books, and they're all the same. They're all from like the craft store,
and so
the
he
dollar
doesn't
store,
differentiate because in fact his brain is not differentiating. His brain is just playing and learning with whatever. And so if you do it a schooly way, it's not better. It's just another thing on the buffet.
Just something else available for him.
Right.
So how did your family get into this? Did you always know you were going to homeschool or unschool, or did you guys have what's your origin story here?
My origin story. My origin story is I'm a mom from the suburbs. I grew up in the suburbs. I went to private schools. I was a little bit rebellious in school because I thought, why are they being like this? I had a resistance. And, but then time came to have kids and I put them in preschool and there was sometimes some problems. And I'm like, why can't he do that? I just kind of wondered. And then somebody would say, well, you wait till they're in school, it's going to be different. I'm like, it'll be all right. I'll be an involved parent. And so I was an involved parent. And I remember when we first sent Michael to kindergarten, this is my oldest, he's 32 now, about to be 33. And they gave us that kindergarten list of all the things he needed to know. And he knew them already. He was an early reader and he could tie his shoes. He could count to 100 because we just played. We just counted. We counted the stairs when we went outside and went somewhere. And he was just curious. And because he hadn't had any real pressure, because he'd had pretty much play-based kind of preschool experiences, he knew those things. And so they're like, well, we'll just reinforce it. Well, it wasn't
so we can
long.
Just sit there and be
it
bored.
Wasn't long before he was bringing home his red folder with all these bad marks of Michael's doodling in the background with pencils. Michael won't sit still. Michael won't read in unison off the chalkboard. Michael, and then, so they're like, we would put him in the gifted program, but he won't sit still for it. I'm like, you mean you have a sit down test for the gifted
for a kindergartner?
Right. And then you're going to blame the kid for that. But at the same time, I was like, well, maybe they know something. I don't know. This is not my area of expertise. And so he went on to first grade and they did put him in the little gifted program. And it, of course, was during PE. So a kid that really needed to run around now didn't even have that because he had to go learn about certain endangered animals because they had a curriculum for their gifted intelligence program. And then their recess, their playground equipment was under construction. So they had to play quietly between the buildings. So he was always in trouble for being too loud, always in trouble for jumping too far.
At 6 years old, right?
Yeah. He needed they needed to do walks around the building, get some energy out. And so it happened. So this was like 1994, 95. And I knew someone who homeschooled her kids. And they were doing the real traditional homeschooling, very religious. And I was just picking her brain. I'm like, what is that like? What is that like? And I leaned in the kitchen and there were her teenagers playing and throwing soap bubbles at each other while they were doing the dishes because she had these ladies over, And I thought, those kids act normal. And so I kept asking, and she said, it's funny. She said, all kinds of people are starting to homeschool now. And I remembered thinking, I'm exactly the person you're probably afraid of, but I'm not telling you because I still want to pick your brain a little more.
I'm exactly the all kinds.
I know. So she sent me somebody else who did rod and staff curriculum. And I'm like, we are not counting shepherds for math. And, but there were some cool science catalogs and I'm like, this could be fun. How hard could second grade be? I can do second grade. And we were in the military. And so we were about to move from San Antonio to Alaska. And I said, okay, Michael, we're going to homeschool, but don't tell anybody. Oh, Mr. Motormouth next thing you know, the teacher calls, hey, I hear you're going to homeschool next year. I'm like, oh God. I was so embarrassed. I don't know why, but who did I think I was, that I was going to step off this thing and do it myself? And she said, which was, because my mom homeschooled my younger sisters, I think it'll be fabulous for him. She said he wanted to know about the moons around Jupiter when we were talking about the planets. And I had to tell him, you're not going to get into that part until 4th grade. And I watched his shoulders slump, and he thought, she said, I could just see him thinking how far away 4th grade was from 1st grade. She goes, you can do his whole room in solar system. And I was like, and we did.
Yeah.
And so we took the folder, which was interesting. They sealed it, do not open, that I was supposed to take to the school. First thing I do is open it. And it was all these sheets of him talking too much, or I'm like, get rid of that. And so I had, back then, the internet wasn't quite what it was. We had Prodigy, we had AOL, you've got mail.
It was early days.
And I didn't know how to find stuff really. And so we had hard copy catalogs, and we just started sending off for them. And then in that first year, we used to pool them. We would get together for a mom's night out, and everybody brought all their catalogs, and we were sitting at a coffee shop sharing things like that. And that was kind of fun. But so I had this idea. I hadn't broken free from the idea of subjects, though. I just thought, I'll sparkle them up, we'll make it nice, but we'll do subjects. And because there was so much religious curriculum, I gravitated towards Calvert, which is, ironically, their tagline is school in a box. Great. And I'm like, why I thought that was okay, I don't know. And because I was hesitant, I paid for the teacher oversight too, because I couldn't be trusted.
Yeah.
And
but that's super normal, right?
It's so normal.
That's people's experience, even like that feeling of like someone wanting to talk to you about your decision to homeschool when you're still like, you don't own the language around it yet. You can't handle having the debate with someone about why you're even doing it. Like,
the first,
I'm just,
you get gung ho, and
yet.
then somebody says something and you're like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, but we're doing it. We're gonna. So it's super normal. And for you to want all the resources and all of the how-tos and all the backup and the teacher to call in case you can't actually cut it.
Right.
Like, that's all.
And
important.
and I have said, we were not a non-religious family. We went to church. That wasn't my motivation. My motivation was, I want this full, rich life for my kid. I want him to be able to learn and grow in whatever direction works for him. And I had 2 other kids at the time. They were young. One of them had a lot of language processing problems. So we had a lot of meltdowns and crying, and it was difficult. And so I'm like, no, we need flexibility in this family. But interestingly, on that first year, I sent her to kindergarten for half day kindergarten, so that I needed a break. Focus on my homeschooling, which was ridiculous. But
it made sense with the mindset you had at the time, right?
It made sense. But I look back, I can remember her getting into the car, and it was back in the day where they had this forced hugging at the end of the day. The teacher hugged every kid as they came down the sidewalk. And I stood there to get my daughter, and she said, Mrs. Bounds, maybe tomorrow you'll like me better. And I didn't immediately say, what the heck is she talking about? I just said, come on, Katie, it'll be better tomorrow. Yeah. And, you look back on your mom moments when your kids are grown, and you think, wow, how could I?
But it just goes to show like how
conforming we are and accepting.
We do what we know and what is normalized to us.
And I like to share these kinds of stories because I want people to get it, that I get it. I am so confident in unschooling now, 100%, because we're on the other side. I can even remember when they were teenagers, linking arms with other parents thinking this should work, right? right? I mean, theoretically, this should work, right? Even then, after 8 years of it, I was still a little hesitant. It's only after the fact that I can look back and say, oh yeah, there is every time that I threw a workbook at them, every time that I let fear make my decisions for me, every time I worried about conforming or what other people would think was a mistake. It didn't give us anything for all of that. Had I taken the time to get some support and some knowledge, then I could have perhaps avoided some of those potholes in the road. And so that's why I talk about this so much, because it's, if a person like me who wasn't thinking about any of this kind of stuff ahead of time can do this, so can you, so can anyone.
Yeah.
All you have to do is want to, you know.
So how did you switch from, school in a box and sending your little one to kindergarten, even though she was miserable every day? Like, what was
I started to notice that real life was really more interesting. And so when I had, we were in Alaska and he was supposed to write about a little red car that was a convertible, and there were no red car convertibles in Alaska. And there had just been an earthquake, and he wanted to write about the moose that came up to the window. And he and I used to do, he would dictate stories and I would just write them. I was a writer. And so I was like, no, we're going to gather these stories, but then we're going to have to turn this stuff into that Calvert lady. And I'm like, can we do it? Can we do the penmanship part about the moose at the window? And she says, oh, no, he has to write about the little red car. and I thought, well, I can really make him hate writing, because at that point I was making him and he was crying, and I'm like, well, just do 2 words. How can 2 words? But he so we had a ceremonial breaking of the pencils. We shall not perform for the woman in Baltimore. And and we dropped the teacher component. And the funny part of that is that we never wrote a book report. We never wrote a research paper. He did have to write thank you notes to grandma. Oftentimes I would print it when you could make the print really low, and he'd take a felt tip pen and we'd do like a font that looked like handwriting. And she'd be like, his handwriting's lovely. I'm like, isn't it?
Isn't he amazing?
Isn't he amazing? And he, he was in Boy Scouts. And so as he got older, he would write little things about badges and stuff. His handwriting was terrible, but he ended up with a degree in journalism. A kid who never wrote a book report, never stepped foot in a high school until actually he ended up joining the Peace Corps. And his Peace Corps assignment was that he taught high school teachers how to teach English in Nicaragua. And so that was his first time to ever be in a high school. And so not writing all those things, at the time I thought, we'll just put it off for a while. We'll come back to it later.
Yeah, it's stressful. We don't need to stress them out.
Right.
Yeah.
And we just, life was always so much more fun. And then I started meeting other unschoolers. Interestingly, we lived near the Hegners, who were the publishers of Home Education magazine. And so they would say things to me like, oh, you're trying to sneak in a little learning on those Zoom beanies? And I'm like, no, we're just playing them. But they started planting these seeds of school doesn't have to look like that. And at the time they had teenagers, I had kids 7 and under. And I thought, yeah, but I want them to be more than snowboarders. I want them to have other opportunities. And what I discovered as time went on is when you let kids move in the direction of their interests, they do fine. And they, here's this kid who likes to tell stories, and then he ends up a journalist major with a minor in archaeology because he really loved Indiana Jones. And, there's still that little unschool. And he just got his MBA this past summer. And so all of that prep ahead of time, I can tell people confidently, you don't need to do it. Their brains may not be ready for it, and you can cause more damage by pushing them to do stuff before they're ready.
And let's talk about that damage for a second, because I think when I think of that, I think about like you're creating memories for them of being bad at something. You're creating fear of failing.
I thought, I can really make him dislike writing. And that was one thing I, as a writer, just wasn't going to do.
Identities of not being good at learning specific things, right?
Yeah. And even identities, you think of your own school experience. And I can remember being like in the, there'd be three, like they called them the robins, the bluebirds, and the cardinals. Like you wouldn't know that the robins were the smart kids, and like that was going to somehow fool the children. And then you would have to help the kids that were in the lower group, and they were struggling. And I would sometimes remember things about my own school experience and think, what if I had a kid that wasn't into it yet because the system said it's time to be into it? They would grow up and really think they were the dumb kid in the room. And how long will it take for somebody to get over that?
I have friends that are in their 40s that are not over that.
I can understand
comes to them, and they're not dumb people. They're smart people, and they still have that. They mess something up, and there you go. They don't understand something the first time they hear it. They're bad at it. It's like, I don't understand something the first time I hear it.
That's
sometimes.
That confirmation bias, right? We have an idea about something, and so our brain looks for support on that theory. And it's really so we want to try to help our kids see their strengths and know that at any point, if they notice a weakness, they can shore it up. And
at any point in their lives, that I think is
no
really
finish line.
Too.
18 is not a magic number, all those kinds of.
We were just talking about that in one of my Clubhouse rooms last week, because we were talking about like setting up internship opportunities and like learning opportunities for older children. They're like really interested in something, and people having this thought of like, oh, you got to squeeze it in, or they have to know this stuff by the time they're 16. It's like, wait, what? Like there's things that I learned by the time I was 16 or by the time I was 20 in college or whatever, but there's things that I've learned since as an adult because I didn't need to know them before. And there's nothing wrong with
I
that.
learned where is Ukraine versus Russia. And I imagine I had to take a test on it somewhere down the road way back, but it's not there for my recollection.
Well, the other thing I was saying too is, so much of this of the subject learning, you don't retain anyways, right? You retain how to learn, you retain how to study, how to gain competence in something. Hopefully you learn how to do that by the time you're done with school. That's what's most important. But if you were to study for like a graduate school entrance exam right now as an adult, you would probably have to gain some subject matter expertise, take some prerequisite courses, do all sorts of stuff to learn things you theoretically should have learned in school, right?
And I would say,
you don't know it then.
And I don't know if I really agree that school teaches you how to learn.
It doesn't always. Hopefully it would, right? That's what you have to. That's what you would.
You know what, Liana? I think you speak like an unschooler. My unschooled kids think, well, some schools might do it right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, in fact, schools teach conformity. Schools teach you how to be a people pleaser. Schools teach you how to compare and compete. I think that maybe you also learned how to learn some other things, but more likely you learned how to go to the back of the book and find that the answer is in the first sentence of every paragraph of that chapter.
Yeah, how to pass the test.
You learn a hack. You learn a hack. How often I can remember, and I know of so many families, what's the minimum I need to get that grade? How can I figure in my GPA so that I could just get, nobody's thinking about, I really want to know about that.
Yeah. And actually, I get that, Sue. And in a previous lifetime, I did a lot of work where I was like a leader in consulting firms and would be on really large IT projects and things. Yeah. And you saw that over and over again with workers, that they were so deeply uncomfortable if they had to navigate their way through something. Instead, they really needed someone to tell them, what is the rule? how do I get the A in this? How do I get the A?
Exactly.
And these are, mid-career professionals that couldn't operate outside of knowing the structure.
Well, that's why it's so rare that a company has like a think tank or it's like, oh, wow, they're in the think, because that's not typical for people to have that looseness to be able to brainstorm. And that's something that it's interesting. A few years ago, Google and a bunch of other big companies said, we don't care about these STEM things and these subjects. We want them to be able to problem solve. We want them to be able to communicate with each other. We want them to be able to collaborate. And those are not skills that are emphasized in a school system. Yeah, I mean, yes, there are some group learning experiences, but it's not how it is in a group situation at work.
No. And I've done that. I mean, I did community college and bachelor's degree and master's degree. So it's like, I get that. And it's not the same. I mean, the master's degree was much more similar to workplace, but no, it
took a long time for you to get to the master's level. I mean, that's a whole lot of years. If you had been in kindergarten in a regular school,
I'm sure I would be shocked if I had done that. In fact, I was obviously unschooled. I started at the community college full-time when I was 16. I did 2 years full-time, and then I did 2 years like part-time when I was working and things like that. And then I transferred to university. But by the time I was done with my university degree, I just did 2 years there, was done. And I was like, I'm never going to school ever again. I was so burnt out. And that wasn't even close to the amount of time that most people spend. And then, 2 years later, I went to a master's program. But
because it was something you wanted, there was a need that you had, that you thought, if I can get my master's, I can make that happen.
And it would be, I was excited to learn again. I wasn't burnt out. Okay. We have some people live asking us questions.
Oh, good. I can't see it, so I don't know where it is.
Yeah. So first there's people, Kelly Edwards is saying hi. She loves the ceremonial breaking of the pencils. It's so good, right? Right. And so Jennifer Hyde is on here asking, asked if she could ask a question. I said, of course. And she said, I don't know if I have a question so much as needing encouragement. I love, love, love the idea of unschooling. This is my second year homeschooling my boys in grades 10 and 6. And then she said their interests mostly revolve around video games. I keep thinking they need to be well-rounded, she says in quotes, in their education. Everything I suggest or present, they aren't interested in. And then she says, I hear of families whose kids cook, play instruments, board games, art, and their days just sound lovely and full and rich. I feel like we are limping along.
Yeah.
What would you say to Jennifer?
I would say that more
and
people.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you.
Thanks, Jennifer. I would say that more people are in your position than in the beautiful life that
my child just wrote a film script and they sent it off and it's getting made.
And you know what? The truth is, I know somebody that wrote a film script.
I know, because those stories are out there.
And the years before that, the mom was like, oh my God, all he talks about is the lighting. All he talks about is, he just watches one YouTube video after another. Oh my gosh. Oh my God. So, but the end product was kudo worthy, and so I think it depends on when you're taking that cross section of when you look at it. And so I think sometimes what's happening is we have to remember that we are in it for the long haul. We have a big arc of time, and there is a whole lot of pieces that are happening in their brains that you don't even have access to. We don't get to peel it back and say, oh, there's the computer thing that shows how this is going to turn out. And then we have our own baggage. I'm a bad mom for letting them. Technology is going to turn them into heroin addicts. All of the crazy.
They're going to be on my couch for the rest of their life because they have no skills.
Right. Right. And so I think, I did a podcast recently about technology, and it really freaked people out because there are so many things that they're learning in technology. They're, and not just, oh, great, they're learning how to shoot people, but they're learning how to stay with something, how to resource it and figure out where am I supposed to find things? So they go online and they watch a hack and they come back and they can't quite do it. So they go back and they try again. And those kinds of skills are transferable. It's not going to be like I'm putting Fortnite on my resume, but it's the skills that you learn while you're playing that stuff. There's so many things that they're learning. Now, that doesn't mean that you just go off and knit in the corner, or you go start a business, or you go have a hobby and you never interact with them. It means that you partner with them. If you're going to look at it from an unschooling perspective, that you think, what can I do to help them feel more supported in their interests? And this cool thing's happening in the community. Let's go see it. Yes, you can get back on the computer when you get home. They're much more likely to say yes to your stuff if you've been saying yes to their stuff. But if you say 2 hours, you're up, then they're going to stay on their 2 hours, even if they were really ready to walk away in an hour and a half, because that's what limits do. You know, it's that forbidden fruit concept. And so I do have something. I have it's called, what is it called? Brainstorm Time. It's an unschooling guide. It's only like $15. And it has 20 different things that you might do in your life. Like maybe instead of, maybe one night you're making some dinner that they like and they learn how to boil the noodles. And maybe they say, oh, I don't want to. You're like, well, just, when maybe they're going to learn how to make brownies, and it's easy. It's got the 3 steps on the back of the box. And it's just an occasional little thing that you toss in their path when they're looking kind of antsy. When you see them just scrolling, or they're like, man, I'm so bored. This is boring. All right, let's get something good. Or you bake the brownies and it smells good and they're like lured out because they're not afraid you're going to take it away from them. And that can happen. Like even those little side comments of like, sure is a nice day. I wish y'all weren't on the computer all the time.
Yeah. Or how come you can't find something else to do? We have all this stuff here to do.
Little
How come
comments.
you guys are just always doing that?
You know what? Those comments just make them hold on tighter. It does not make them feel like mom's on my side. It's mom's against me with my beloved, whatever it is I love. And so you want to be on their team. And so, Jennifer, you mentioned you've been doing this for a couple of years. It's hard because you've learned how to do it in a pandemic where the community was shut down for probably the first year of your,
especially that age of kids, 6th grade and 10th grade. That's really hard to do without people.
There are, there are things that are going to start opening up that they might be able to do. And some kids are not into it. Some kids are introverts and they feel great when they play video games because there's not the pressure to be like, maybe they're a little socially awkward, and don't think that homeschoolers have a corner on the market of socially awkward.
We do pretty good in that market, but we're not the only one.
We're not. Sure. I mean, I remember when my son was in a Boy Scout troop, and that whole troop went to school except for him and one other kid, and I thought, this is the most collection of socially awkward children I've ever seen in my life. And that was when I first thought, wow, you can. Because it makes sense that school just supports the extrovert, you're more popular, you have all those things. So what about the introvert? Yeah. And the truth of the matter is the world is full of both. And if you don't feel bad about being the introvert, if you can see that your strengths are celebrated too, and then, which is what can happen in unschooling and even can happen with gamer kids, that they get an opportunity to talk to other kids, and how when they said that, oh, that kid don't want to be your friend anymore. All right, but they may roll back around again. It's not like you just had this big embarrassing thing on the cul-de-sac, because you have other opportunities. And so I think that there's just a lot of benefits for a variety of children that play a lot of video games. And the other thing that I know a lot of people are worried about is, well, what's going to happen? No one's going to hire them to be Fortnite players. But my experience, and I've known a ton of kids that have grown up and become young adults. Often those gamer kids were move into the IT aspect of some company, but they are not living in anybody's basement and playing. I mean, and even if they did, kids have times. I had kids that weren't, one was kind of a gamer kid, the other two weren't really. And they came and left and came and left through their early 20s as they were kind of transitioning into adulthood. And it wasn't a bad thing. You know, we have that judginess about, oh, well, your kid didn't failure to launch, you know, kind of thing. And some kids aren't ready to launch fully.
18 is not very old.
It's not
very old.
You know, it looks really old when you have a 12-year-old. It looks really old when your kids are little.
They're little.
But you know, let me tell you, my kids are now 32, 30, and 27 and 18. Looks like babies. And
they definitely do to me at this point in my life. I'm like, oh, they're so young. So I love that advice. I love you saying partnering, you know, partner with them, be on their team. Right. And the more they feel like you're on their team, you're not judging them. You're not going to like get upset one day and just like take it all away from them because you get frustrated or past your point of tolerance. The more they'll be open to doing. And so
maybe, Jennifer, maybe what you need to do is learn more about the technology, learn more about, look at what are you afraid of? Are you afraid they're never going to leave? Or are you afraid they're addicted to, you know, that whole concept?
Yeah, because that's real too.
Let's break it apart and see whether that's an issue. And a lot of times when people say things like kids are addicted to technology, it's really just sensationalism, you know, that it's an article that says, you know, about the dopamine and everything. And that dopamine gets triggered when you have your favorite piece of pie, you know, because you're like, that's the same trigger in your brain. So don't get caught up. You know how everybody needs to sell an article.
Yeah. Well, and I get it too. Like, oh my goodness, some people, kids that I'm close with that go to school, I understand how they want to be on their tablet the whole rest of the time or their laptop or their video game. Yeah, they have 2 hours of free time.
They have to eat and they have to do some homework and they have to take a bath.
And they're burnt out. You know, it's like, it's exhausting to be at
Finally, they get to say something about their life and self-direct a little bit. And so and that's the other thing too. How do you learn? Because lots of people say, yeah, but they don't self-regulate. I have to regulate them. But how are you going to learn to self-regulate if you're not allowed to self-regulate? You know, how do you learn?
Especially at 14 or 15 years old.
Yeah. Well, how are you going to learn where your edges are if you're not allowed to fall off the edge? And isn't it better to fall off the edge while your parents are feeding you and housing you than to discover? And it's just my experience with unschooled kids that played a lot of video games is they, something else happens and then they take that singular focus, because some kids are dabblers and some kids are deep divers, and they often they take that and they're like, oh, I got exposed to this thing and I think this is really cool and I'd like to go in this direction. And when they have had that family partnership, then they are able to just always think, and you know, that they're doing their technology and they're traveling, they're doing that technology and they're watching movies with mom and talking about what you see, or they're listening to an audiobook on their way to karate class. And I think sometimes two people think, oh, this is all they do. Again, it's that confirmation bias. And that's true. To soccer practice, they wash the dog with you on Saturday. You know, it's not all they're doing. Is there another question?
No, it's just Jennifer. Yep, I'm looking. Jennifer is saying, I have a 19-year-old as well and totally agree about it still being so young. This has been wonderful encouragement. I'm not concerned about addiction or never moving out, more so judgment from others and then making sure that they're well-rounded aspect.
Okay. So the well-rounded thing, again, that has to do with looking at the big arc, you know, that you might have, say you got a new book and you were really into it and you just read it every chance you got. And you're just like, oh, another chapter. I got to get to it. And that day was not well-rounded. That was the day you ordered pizza. That was the day so you have to.
No laundry got done.
No laundry got done. Everybody ate from paper plates. You know, there's no dishes boiling. And so, because when you're really into something, then you're in that flow. You know, they talk about flow. And so recognizing that I'm looking at a whole childhood, not just when they were 14. Because that's another thing. Even just that age is a hard age. That age is the age that they start to see where they fit in the world, and they start to kind of measure themselves against other people, and they can feel badly about things. And playing video games might help them feel better, or it might give them a little bit of reprieve from that. And that's just a growth and developmental thing. So I think that for Jennifer, what I would say is always think unschooling success comes when you have knowledge and you have support and you're taking some action. And so learn more about how unschooling works. And a lot of times people tell me, oh no, I read all that when we first started. And I continued to learn about unschooling. Even now I read stuff. I'm like,
I'm learning. I'm trying to learn all the time. And I lived it,
Yeah. And so continue to learn about it. Find support. When you're worried about what other people think, you might need to evaluate who your crowd is. And if you are around a bunch of homeschoolers who are very traditional school at home kind of people, you may need to make sure you have some other unschoolers in your life, whether it's coming to Liana's clubhouse or joining my membership. We talk about this technology thing all the time because it's everywhere, and so figuring out, oh yeah, I said it like that. That was probably not the best way. And so if you say, oh my gosh, I'm worried about my kids on technology, to somebody that says, yeah, I make my kids have only 1 hour a day, you're gonna get that kind of a comment. And so when you think about unschooling and you think about, my goal is connection with my kid, that if I as a parent want to have some influence on my children, they have to trust me. They have to know that I'm not just trying to manipulate them. They have to know that I see the good in them and I see their strengths. And then we have that partnership. And so when you can do that, then they're a lot more open to some ideas where you can say, yeah, I don't really want to count the hours for how many, to limit you, but I would like us to get to that festival that's happening on Thursday. Or I would like, on Tuesday night, we're making mustacholi and that's your favorite thing. And someday you're going to move out. So let's do it together. And so that you'll know how to feed yourself and you won't have to just buy boxes of lean cuisine.
That's exactly what I do. Even with my super young son, like I say, yeah, we don't have like a time limit to watch shows, but or to play video games. He doesn't play that many video games yet, but he likes to watch things on TV and stuff, or on streaming. And we do a diversity of things, so things need to happen still in our day. We still need to get dressed. We still need to take care of our bodies. We still need to cook food. And sometimes you need to help with that preparation. We still need to clean up our toys. We need to have outside time to take care of our bodies too. But, there's also free time that you have to do whatever you want in. And if you want to watch shows, but let's do a diversity of things.
Pandemic has been weird. Like, I'm just going to be really honest with you. I have PJ bottoms on right now. I didn't get fully dressed for this live interview. I curled my hair. From the top up.
Great, Sue.
Thanks, doll. Anyway, but my point is, sometimes when we think you have to get dressed, in the pandemic, did we really? Was it nicer to have less laundry?
I didn't get dressed a lot of my childhood. I mean, not like dress, not to leave the house dressed.
Exactly. And so when the pandemic keeps you from leaving the house, then those sweats that you're in today, like you were in yesterday,
but hopefully there's not food all over.
Yeah, you didn't do anything in them, and so, if they have a stain, all right, it's time to change. And I guess that's just my point, that the pandemic has kind of had a weird, we hold on to these ideas of these are the things you need to be doing. But in a pandemic, do you? I
get that. It's like, I just always go back to the piece that you were saying about connection. Right. It is about the connection and relationships within our family. Right. And how is everyone doing? Are we staying connected? If we haven't done that, then being dressed, having your hair brushed,
right,
how much screen time you watched, whether you guys just
pleasing
ate
those
pizza,
people
none of
that
that
you're
matters.
worried about, right?
Exactly.
Jennifer's talking about being worried about what other people think. And, you know, and a lot of that's part of our school conditioning. You know, did the teacher approve of me? Did I get an A? Did I get the kudos? You know, it really does teach you to be a people pleaser. And so being around other unschoolers that are learning how to really individualize the life and the learning and all of the interconnection, gives you a little bit more support as you do something so unconventional as this. You know, because
Sue,
I get it.
I love that. I love that. And so we're getting to almost an hour of our
Oh
conversation.
my gosh.
You and I are, this is just the way we are, right? We can't really stop. Not both of us are like this.
I love
so
it.
Tell me then, that I think was a really good segue with you saying, you know, you need support, you need people, you need to know that you're not alone in this. You're not reinventing a wheel. There's another parent that has 2 kids that are playing video games all day and can't
or that's worried about what are other people going to think.
Exactly.
Or
this is not new.
Worry as I do.
Exactly. Yeah. And so what are the things that you're doing right now to support people? Where can people find you? Because you have a ton of free stuff and you also have stuff that's part of your business and all of that.
I do. I have a podcast that started almost a year ago, and that's a little 5 to 10 minute pep talk. And so that, because I was finding that and maybe I just have a little ADD or something, but I wasn't getting to the end of the hour long, you know, that other people do podcasts, and some of you may have faded out on us too.
Oh yeah. It's not, long form is not for everybody,
it's
right?
Not. And so I thought, we don't have any 5 or 10 minute, I've got to get these dishes done and I just need a little pep talk. And so I have tried this past couple months. I haven't done it every week, but I have tried. I've got over 50 for people to listen to. And those have been really good. And they've been really helpful for people. I have the Unschooling Mom2Mom video channel on YouTube. So you can kind of work through those. I don't have too many videos over there, but you can kind of work through those. I have a Q for Sue kind of a thing that people can write, and I can get you resources really quickly. So if you're like, I'm worried about what other people think, I don't really want to join a membership for every month, but I just need a deep dive on how to overcome this self-criticism or criticism from others. Well, I have a little $15 unschooling guide that takes 25 years of conversations, because I'm kind of that way where
you have a ton of resources like that on your website. I had no idea how many you actually had.
I know, because you know what? I'm really great at creating them and really terrible at marketing them.
Well, yeah, if anyone has a piece that they're working on,
there's
Sue
20
has
guides.
Something for it.
I have like 365 things, 365 days of deschooling, or what to do about technology, which is a really great guide about things, what we say and what that can actually mean to children and how we might say it differently, or articles that we could read to start reframing how we look at it. It's not the enemy. You know, let's figure that out. So and that's, you know, all the guides are only about $15, and they're anywhere from 15 to 40 pages of information. It's just a PDF, so you get it right away. And then I have a course. If you're like, no, I really want unschooling and I need a good foundation. And personally, I love courses. And so the course is there for you. It's got 4 modules, and we talk about how to overcome fears, what's your role as a parent, how will they learn what they need, things like that. So that's there. I'm trying to think of what else. And the membership, which I love. Like, I just had coaching calls. We do 3 coaching calls a week. So we have different times to catch people, because it's international, and it's really nice to talk with other parents who are on this journey too, and who have like, oh yeah, we had that happen, and here's what we did. And it's been going on since 2016, when I did a little course, and we got together for the course, and they're like, but we don't want to stop. I'm like, well, let's make a membership.
Good
and
for you.
That was way back when people said, no, don't do memberships. I'm like, no, I think I just want to connect with people. Yeah. And so that's available to people, and it doesn't have it. You don't have to like buy 6 months of it, or anything. You can just buy a month at a time, or when it's hard. I have people that come back, they have like a certain time of year is really hard for them. And so they come back every year for about 3 months, get their fix. And
so smart, like winter time for a lot of people, right? When it feels hard and long and you're stuck inside, even when it's not the pandemic.
Right. Yeah. And so I have Instagram and Pinterest and Facebook, and those are ways to, if you're like, oh, I'm still in the free mode, and it's all there, it's about how much time do you want to spend, or do you want me to handhold? And I do one-to-one coaching too. So sometimes you're like, I don't have time. I just want laser focused on my issues.
That's what I always find, because there's so much from amazing unschoolers and homeschooler folks right now out there to learn from. But at the same time, if you have like that one question you need answered, you have that one laser focus you need, then
yeah. And I've even had people buy like a little package, and they set it up every month. We do 30 minutes, and they save up their question, and we just dive into it. And we're like, all right, you're good to go. Talk to you next month. And especially when you're in a community where you don't have people that you can just meet for a mom's night out and brainstorm about unschooling ideas. But
or there's like a raging pandemic and you can't meet in person.
And meet in your jammies, and we will just chat.
That's how I like it. I love that. Sue, thank you so much.
I'm excited for you to have this channel. I'm happy you invited me to do this with you. I hope it grows and grows. The more
I hope so too.
Let people know that unschooling works. It works. And it's your fear that you've got to get over. And I mean, you don't got to get over anything, but if
that's what's holding you back. The fear is what's holding you back.
Yeah. It's not my kid is broken or my kid is not, it's your fear. And so let's get that in check, figure out, I always think of it as like fear is like a 4-year-old that wants to drive the car. And you don't say, well, okay, I guess.
Well, go for it, honey.
Instead, really you get them a little plastic steering wheel and you set it back there with them and you're like, drive on. And that's what you have to kind of do with your fear. You have to listen to it, because if you don't, it will get bigger and bigger. And then it's like a runaway mine train. And figure out, okay, here are the things I'm afraid of. And here are some resources that will help me bring that down to a dull roar,
Yes. And I think one of the biggest things on that is the storytelling. When people have story after story to look at and understand and really begin to get, like you're saying, even when your kids were teenagers, you were still saying, oh my gosh, I hope this works.
Right. Yeah. I think people think, why am I still not getting it? Well, because you're a parent. Because this is just how this goes. And it was okay for a 9-year-old, but now you don't think it's okay for a 15-year-old. And now you're a different, it is.
Yep. And you need that story. You need that story from that teenager. You need to hear the story of Sue's grown kids and story of like
and I have
myself and my brothers.
That homeschooled teens book that I interviewed 75 young people about what their lives were like by not going to school. And they shared all the questions that I used to hear at conferences, of where there'd be a teen panel and somebody'd say, how'd you make friends? How hard was it getting into college? Do you hate your mom now? All the things. And so they all answered it. It was so
When did they move out?
Yeah. Would you do this yourself? Would you homeschool your own kids? What are you doing now? And so there are resources. So contact me if you have certain fears, let me know, and I can point you in the direction of resources. I'm happy to do it. Happy.
I love it. All right. Well, thank you so much, Sue.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you everyone who joined live. And if you come in afterwards and watch our replay, please leave comments and questions. I'll be checking those, and I'll get things to Sue or ping her in there too, because she's a YouTuber also, so she'll see that if we tag her in those pieces also. And definitely subscribe to the channel, because the more, if you do that, then you're going to see the live the notifications that we're actually going live. And I'm doing them. I have been doing them once a week. We'll see if I keep that up or if once every other week after I get a few more out there. But I'm really excited for people to be able to just have these stories, so many more of these stories for themselves as well. All right. Thank you so much for being here, Sue.
Thanks everybody. And thanks for inviting me.